don't forget London Town each and every Saturday. Cantrell Road off of Bow Common Lane, Bow E3. Shakedown. Place to be each and every Saturday. Music supplied by DJs from Fantasy FM. Each and every Saturday, from early till late. If you was down there last week, you know that it kicked. Up to see you down there this week again. Shakedown.
I want you in my life. You make my life so bright. And whenever you need me, I'll be here for you. And forever you will be a part of me.
House music rooted from disco revolutionized Detroit's techno sound, Chicago's LGBT and club scenes, then dominated New York City when Larry Levan played it in the famous Paradise Garage nightclub and many other nightclubs of the future. But where this American sound really hit hard was here in Britain. Pete Tong, a record label scout, was trying to find the newest dance music sound. That is when he found house music. Pete Tong put together a compilation album of the newest house music called The House Sound of Chicago. This is what created the British demand for house music, especially for Steve Silk Hurley's Jack Your Body, the UK first house #1. Bear in mind, this track had no mainstream plays, as many mainstream radio stations were not playing any house music at the time, except for the pirate radio stations. Pirate radio is an important part of British musical history, as pirate radio stations would play music alternative to the mainstream radio stations. One pirate radio station in particular was LWR 92.5 FM, London Weekend Radio. LWR's DJ Jazzy M, he had a radio show called The Jackin' Zone, which was considered the first radio station to play out house music.
Well, there you go, the first time on LWR 92.5, the Garage and House Chart Show, as you should hear it. Every week, every Thursday, with myself, Jazzy M, the #1 sound, Farley Jack Master Funk, and of course, the very, very, very talented vocals of Daryl Pandy.
Which then followed on by Steve Jackson's show, House That Jack Built, on Kiss FM.
Right, of course, this is the house that Jack built, and it's been going on for over a year, right? Didn't start on this station, but it's been started over a year ago. What I want you to do is either guess or tell me, if you think you know, what month it was.
Another important DJ was Stu Allen. He would become an important radio DJ, giving the first radio plays to the likes of a guy called Gerald, 808 State, and Shut Up and Dance, to name a few, in Manchester's Piccadilly Radio and Key 103 FM. The UK was embracing the electronic sounds from the States. They would go to the record shops such as Groove Records in Soho and many others. But what about the clubs here in Britain? What was going on with them? Before, in the 70s and early 80s, people would either hit a few clubs or hit the pubs. Pubs closed at 11 PM and clubs finished at 1 AM. And you wouldn't get into some clubs unless you made an effort on the way you dressed. Now, on the other hand, back in New York City had a vibrant scene regarding the discotheques such as the Roxy, Dunsteria and the Paradise Garage. They had the dancing and they had the vibe. Gretton and Tony Wilson would visit these clubs thinking about why they could do this in New York but not here in the UK. So they took the risk in the city of Manchester, using a disused yacht showroom and transforming it to the iconic club, the Hacienda. On May 10th, 1982, the notorious Manchester nightclub opened, a venue for youth culture to have a sense of place. Little did they know at the time that this venue would be a key establishment in the rise of acid house and rave music. the center of the rave revolution for over 15 years, the blueprint for many super clubs here in Britain. Key times that house and techno was tested at a club dance floor was at an event called Delirium by brothers Noel and Maurice Watson, which was at the Astoria nightclub in Charing Cross Road. Originally an event playing electro, funk and rare grooves, but they tested house and techno to the crowd. As stated in part 1 and part 2, the New Age traveller community came out of the hippie culture, being anti-war, environmentalists, and bringing peace. They would have free festivals, showing live bands and bringing a formal community. They created their own free festivals in the UK, such as the Windsor Festival, the Isle of Wight, Glastonbury Festival, and the important Stonehenge Free Festival. Stonehenge is an ancient stone circle in England north of Salisbury. Around 5,000 years old, it is considered as a prehistoric temple because of the stones are aligned to the movement of the sun within the sunrise and sunset of the midsummer solstice. In 1972, it was believed to be the first Stonehenge festival that took place. It was low-key and held on the day of the summer solstice. And they will grow to be one of the most important free festivals for another 12 years, peaking at 70,000 by 1983. Having live bands and shows that lasted for almost a month each time. The ingestion of the hallucinogens was important during the pilgrimage to the stones. The whole experience was a spiritual journey for many. But as more people attended, by 1983 the old school hippies and travellers were becoming the minority, and therefore the original festival etiquette and behaviour was declining. Unfortunately, was also the rise in hard drugs such as the opiates. In 1985, the 12th annual Stonehenge Festival was declared banned by the Thatcher government, but the organisers and festival goers were determined to have the event, and the authorities were ready. During the 80s, the New Age travellers and festival goers would travel with their mobile homes in convoys, which means moving along in formation or group to their next festival destination. The convoy group, known as the Peace Convoy, would be targeted.
The convoy of 150 trucks, coaches and caravans moved off shortly after midday to drive to Stonehenge in defiance of the law.
The convoy consisted of 150 vehicles, which made its way to Stonehenge. Around 1,000 police forces would ambush the convoy. They were dodging roadblocks, driving off fields, and the authorities were doing everything to prevent the festival from happening. 530 people were detained, taken to police stations across the West Country. Many children were taken to care by social services. Vehicles were being destroyed, and a lot of these vehicles were family homes. And unfortunately, a few travellers' animals were put down.
Are you still there, boys? Out your way!
See what they're doing to us! Help me!
The Battle of Beanfield incident deserves recognition, thus never forgotten. The scale of violence unleashed in order to stop a peaceful festival by the government.
Vietnam, he was 19. Vietnam, he was 19. 19.
Now, Ibiza is important in this musical journey. Ibiza in the early 80s was only known as a tourist holiday destination, with a lot of pubs and a few small clubs. However, it was when 4 British DJs went there and decided to head to the well-known Amnesia nightclub. Danny Rampling, Johnny Walker, Nicky Holloway and Paul Oakenfold. They would experience the club scene like never before. A learning experience.
In Vietnam.
The music played was controlled by DJ Alfredo, the godfather of Balearic music of Ibiza house, playing the hottest house and techno tracks from the US and then mixing it with mainstream tracks such as George Michael, Kate Bush and many more. Not many places were playing this type of music in the clubs in London at the time, and this was about to change. People were still craving the sound and moment of the vibes they would have experienced back in the party island of Ibiza. The Project Club. The legendary Carl Cox would set up a sound system, become the opening DJ, and they would have brought over resident Amnesia DJ Alfredo Fiorito, the godfather of Balearic beat, DJs from Detroit and Chicago. But this only lasted a few weeks until the police raided it. Later in 1988, Paul would then open and start Spectrum, which was held at Heaven. It quickly gained the reputation that anything goes. At the same time, Danny Rampling returned and founded Shoom in a fitness centre in Southwark. It was strictly invite only. They would use smoke machines and strobe lights, underground, small air vents as windows, but there was big energy, no fights, and just pure vibes. Shoom would widely be accredited as the growth of the acid house movement. Bear in mind, drugs have been within the music scene way before the acid house era, but being in the right place at the right time can make all the difference. It was later found itself in its first club setting in Dallas, Texas, being sold over the bar, which is crazy.
Being on what I considered the priority drugs, heroin and cocaine, I started getting all these calls on ecstasy, MDMA. It was not illegal, and it was being sold at nightclubs, very popular here in Dallas.
Ecstasy was popular with everyone from housewives to urban cowboys.
It ended up in a cult. Then from the cult was then brought to Ibiza. Supposedly some disciples brought it to Ibiza, which was the connection between chemists and smugglers in Holland and the UK. And here's where the demand for ecstasy and the love of music becomes one. March 1988, a warehouse complex on Clink Street would start the RIP events. On Saturdays, Mr. C, Eddie Richards, Kids Bachelor and many others would play more underground house techno compared to Shoom's Balearic style. RIP events were full. Also, the RIP was one of the first in the scene to feature an MC on the house and techno tracks, MCE Mix. You have to bear in mind that before the raves there was also football. Football is rooted in the working class games and culture. During the 60s, through the 70s and the 80s, football firms were dominating the terraces, standing their ground against other firms on theirs and other terraces. Now the reason why this is important is because many of the gents that were involved in the firms would start their own door firms, sometimes work in the pub, bars and club doors. However, later on, during the rise of the UK rave scenes, party organisers would be targeted by thieves and dealers. So they will have to go to the firms for hired muscle and security for their raves. Around this time, another important person in the scene needs to be mentioned, Joe Viachorek. Inspired by what he's seen in the RIP events and other events, Joe and his partner Sue would later start his own parties. From then on, for that Saturday, Labyrinth was born. Remember that during this time, a generation has been brought under Thatcher's rule. By the mid to late 80s, young people needed a mental and physical release or escape to some extent. And these parties was the release. And you did not want to miss out. When you notice a demand for something you know you can supply, thus helping you financially, people will take the risk, illegally or not. A rise of young entrepreneurs, the ones that Thatcher always encouraged. Now, house and techno was still niche and underground, even though the UK had tracks in the charts already in '88. But finding venues to host certain underground house events was not easy, thus not going to be allowed at legal nightclub venues on a weekend night, unless you had connections, but still no guarantee. You have to deal with the late night licenses, closing by either 1, 2 or 3 in the morning. You had the dress codes, the random clueless walk-in suited punters, and the shitty venue managers. Too much hassle. You will need to find a place to host the event. Okay, so this is how it went. Like we know, many did not want to host their event at licensed venues because of lack of connections and limitations that would come from it. Money, strict door policies and so forth. So they would have had to do it themselves. First, you will need to find the right crew, the right mindset group, the mindset to actually go for it and take the risk. This collective would be especially important if your group was money hungry. Then, you will need to have the right name and logo to go along with it. Something that has meaning, stands out, quality of what you represent, and what separates you from the competition. This is your event's identity. Then, you will need to find a location site, an empty warehouse of some sorts. If you had a connection to someone with the entry keys, if not, you would have to break in order to scope out the place, and to see if it had space to hold enough party heads in. Remember, the number of party heads was increasing, so when money is involved, then there is demand, then there is competition. In this case, there was a demand on certain warehouse sites. Not only did the location need to be easy to get to, but most importantly, it had to be away from the local residents, as they would be the first to call the authorities. Secrecy is at its most importance. You can't let many people know, as the location was baited out fast. You need them to visit several locations till they reach the final site. In order to get the addresses of the final locations, you will need to get to meeting points prior. These meeting points were far away from the event site. One of the workers of the events would stand around at these points and give you directions if someone asked.
Meeting points from 9 PM sharp are as follows: Blackheath, Greenwich Parkside, and Shinolas, Waterden Road, Hackney.
Thank you for calling the location information line for You Know the Score. Here are your meeting points: London Bridge, Southwark Bridge.
There were many raves that were happening during the late 80s, but there was a few that people should know about and their importance. Hedonism would be considered the first illegal warehouse party, which took place in an empty printing warehouse near Alperton and Hunger Lane in West London. The aim wasn't to make money at first, it was simply for the love of the party. By August 1988, Apocalypse Now event was set up at the Wembley Studios, hosted by Tony Colston Hayter. Tony was disappointed with Shoom's new strict door policies and decided to put on his own night. However, in October 1988, he changed its name. This was due to him inviting ITN to film at one of the events, but instead of positivity, it focused more on the shock footage and drug paraphernalia. Due to this negative publicity, Tony changed the name to the legendary Sunrise event.
Hey, is this where the party's at? Aw, man.
Sunrise is important as it would be considered as one of the most successful parties of the late 80s. The first Sunrise event unfortunately was stopped by police. However, on November 5th, Guy Fawkes' edition party was the eye-opener. 4,000 tickets were sold, but as the numbers grew, so does the attention of the media and police. But with the negative attention, the numbers of the party heads would grow for Sunrise.
Yo, when this party started, right? Yo, when this party started, right? Come on. Yo, when this party started, right? Yo, when this party started, right? Now quickly.
Another important event and such case of young entrepreneurs was the Genesis Collective. Andrew Pritchard and Wayne Anthony. They were young rave organizers and that had been involved in the clubbing scene and realized the potential of money being made off the scene. Andrew Pritchard had experience in doing blues parties and had a sound system. Genesis Wayne worked in the music industry anyway, so the heart of music has always been there for them too. Coincidentally, their first event was at the same time as Rave at the Cave in Elephant and Castle had got raided. People at the rave were looking for the next place, and that's when Genesis comes in. They went to hold a few more parties that year. But in order to take your brand to another level, when you're a big player in the game, it is best to join forces with another big player in the game. And that is what happened. A Sunrise and Genesis party. Sunrise was already known as one of the biggest events in the country, and to come together would take the game to a whole other level.
Yo, when this party started, right? Yo, when this party started, right?
On the other hand, besides Sunrise and Genesis, there were many more events that came through in '89, such as Biology. Rat Pack started their own event named Trip City. You had Back to the Future. You had Energy. You had Weekend World. You had World Dance. Too many in London and around country.
Like this.
With all these parties, the powerful sound systems, the music that was coming out, and the number of ravers that attended them, it was a unique time in our music culture. And just like any youth movement at the time, will have negative media criticism. But now looking back, you had a generation which had found a place in youth history, the rave generation. But to those who have experienced it, that time period, them years, that summer, for many, will be considered as our version of the Summer of Love. I truly recommend checking out the works of Genesis Wayne Anthony, the 88 podcast, which Wayne Anthony hosts and talks with artists and organisers of the times. I also recommend his book Class of 88, which covers the great times and also the difficult situations they had to deal with. I will also link relevant links and channels in the description. Please check them out and show them some support. In the next part, we'll be going through the early 90s, where DJs and producers started blending in the breaks and mixing it with the house and techno sound. We'll also tap into the genres that were forming at the time and the sounds of UK hardcore.